America is the only place where someone can't afford groceries but somehow owns a $4,000 champagne shooting drone. And if you think that's the peak of financial delusion, buckle up. The real masterpieces of bad decisions are coming. 1. A man decided rent was optional the moment he discovered a designer water brand that claimed to be harvested from the tears of Norwegian glaciers. Instead of paying his landlord the very normal, very terrestrial amount he owed, he dropped several paychecks on glass bottles shaped like minimalist spears, each containing 12 ounces of liquid that looked suspiciously like tap water with an identity crisis. He displayed them on floating shelves as if he'd curated a museum of overpriced hydration. Guests were instructed to experience the purity before drinking, which mostly meant trying not to laugh while sipping something indistinguishable from whatever leaks out of a refrigerator door. The best part came when eviction day arrived, and movers watched him load boxes marked fragile, emotional support waters. He insisted the bottles were a long-term investment that would appreciate with climate change, proving the only thing evaporating faster than Arctic ice was his financial stability. 2. A woman skipped rent entirely after falling in love with a velvet-upholstered, voice-activated cat bed for a cat that demonstrably hated her. The device came with LED mood lighting, temperature control, and a subscription app that sent her notifications like "Muffin is displeased" and "Muffin requests ambiance." She justified the four-figure purchase by claiming her pet deserved the lifestyle of a minor royal, even though Muffin had previously shown interest only in chewing cardboard and ignoring everyone's existence. When the eviction notice arrived taped to her door, she explained to the property manager that she'd been prioritizing emotional well-being, pointing toward the cat bed glowing like a disco altar. Muffin, sitting 6 feet away on a pile of unfolded laundry, stared with the exact expression a judge gives a defendant who's clearly guilty, unimpressed and slightly concerned that someone can be this financially irresponsible over an animal that doesn't know her name. 3. A guy blew his entire month's rent on a limited edition artisan latte machine that could allegedly analyze his personality and brew a beverage to match his mood. The glossy brochure described it like a caffeinated oracle, promising introspective espresso and emotionally aligned foam art. In reality, the machine asked 3 questions, misread every answer, and consistently produced drinks that tasted like hot resentment. The owner insisted it was malfunctioning, yet kept it proudly displayed like a trophy from the Olympics of bad decisions. When friends pointed out he no longer had a place to live, he claimed the machine was an investment in inner peace, because nothing calms the soul like sipping bankruptcy-flavored cappuccinos. Eventually, he ended up couch surfing, dragging the 80-pound machine with him like a medieval curse. Each host lasted 2 mornings before asking him to leave, usually after the machine announced their energy profile and spit out a lukewarm existential crisis. 4. Someone spent their rent money on a hyper-realistic animatronic houseplant that waved gently, hummed ambient tones, and allegedly improved the vibe of the room. It cost more than a used car and required weekly software updates, all so guests could walk in and mistake it for a regular plant before being startled when it turned toward them like a friendly but deeply unsettling robot fern. The owner described it as a therapeutic companion, a phrase that did not convince the landlord when rent failed to appear for the 3rd consecutive month. During the eventual walkthrough, the robot plant tried to greet the landlord with a calming audio clip titled "Soothing Renewal," which only served to heighten the sense that both tenant and foliage required psychological evaluation. The final irony came when the power was cut off and the plant froze mid-wave, silently judging the financial priorities that doomed both of them. 5. A man spent his entire monthly budget on gold-plated dumbbells engraved with motivational quotes written in Latin, presumably to add a classical vibe to the act of ignoring exercise equipment. The dumbbells weighed exactly the same as their affordable counterparts, but he claimed the gold improved muscular inspiration. The only muscle truly affected was his landlord's eyebrow, which rose dramatically when he learned the tenant had skipped rent to purchase fitness jewelry. The dumbbells ended up displayed as decor, because using them would risk scratching the gold surface, which would apparently diminish the aesthetic integrity. When he finally moved out after an eviction, he tried to transport the dumbbells in a suitcase that immediately ripped open, sending them rolling dramatically down the stairwell like a pair of luxury boulders escaping captivity. The neighbors described the sound as an expensive avalanche, which is also a fitting metaphor for his financial judgment. 6. A woman decided rent could wait after discovering a gemstone-infused hairdryer marketed as the world's first spiritually aligned blowout experience. The product description promised energetic volumization and chakra-responsive airflow, phrases that should have been warning signs but instead triggered her credit card like a booby trap. She spent hundreds, close to $1,000, on a device that lit up in rainbow pulses and sounded like it was trying to summon a minor weather system. Her hair looked identical to before, which she blamed on energetic interference from the apartment, conveniently ignoring that the apartment was 2 months behind on rent and moments away from becoming a memory. When the landlord finally posted a removal notice, she tearfully insisted the hairdryer was a non-negotiable investment in self-alignment. Strangely, the hairdryer did not spiritually realign her into paying her bills, though it did make a delightful humming noise as she packed it into a box labeled Life Essentials. 7. A guy chose to buy a custom-built gaming chair shaped like a throne from a discount medieval theme park liquidation sale instead of paying rent. The chair featured faux gold armrests, a velvet seat, and a speaker system that played dramatic orchestral music every time he sat down. It weighed roughly as much as a small horse and required 4 people to move. He proclaimed it was a symbol of personal sovereignty, though being evicted tends to undermine one's royal status. When movers eventually arrived to escort him and his furniture off the premises, the chair blared triumphant battle music as they lifted it, creating the world's saddest parade. Neighbors watched from their windows as he rolled away atop his ridiculous throne, refusing to make eye contact. The chair may have been fit for a king, but nothing says abdicated quite like losing your apartment because you bought seating that demands its own national anthem. 8. Someone blew rent money on a designer candle collection sold by an influencer who claimed each scent could alter destiny. The candles came with handwritten cards describing aromas like ambition fog, wealth aura, and cosmic lavender for discouraging mediocrity. Each candle cost more than a week's groceries, but the purchaser insisted the fragrances would attract abundance, a strategy that somehow only attracted eviction notices. During the final inspection, the property manager found dozens of half-burned candles arranged like someone was preparing for a seance centered around manifesting better financial habits. Ironically, the candle labeled Prosperity Ignite had burned out after 2 hours, symbolism so heavy it could have been taught in a literature class. The tenant attempted one last ritual by lighting all the candles at once, filling the apartment with scents that clashed so violently the air smelled like a wealthy ghost having an existential breakdown. Destiny remained unmoved, but the fire alarm was deeply engaged. 9. A woman spent her rent on a subscription service that mailed her monthly artisanal luxury ice cubes, each hand-carved, individually wrapped, and accompanied by a poetic description of the glacier from which its spirit was inspired. Not carved out of an actual glacier, of course, just artistically interpreted, which is marketing language for frozen water wearing a monocle. She justified the purchase by explaining that regular ice tastes emotionally flat. Her landlord disagreed, especially after she missed multiple payments while continuing to receive boxes of dramatically overpriced frozen disappointment. When the power shut off, the artisanal cubes melted instantly, leaving behind soggy cards printed with phrases like "a meditation on coldness" and "please enjoy mindfully." The sight of her luxury ice dissolving into sad puddles on the counter did strangely evoke mindfulness, the kind one experiences when realizing an eviction might have been prevented by simply not investing in boutique water squares. 10. A man decided his apartment wasn't worthy of rent until it contained a floating holographic aquarium that projected Ultra HD fish swimming through midair. For the price of 2 months' housing, he acquired a device that made his living room look like a screensaver from the future. It emitted gentle whooshing sounds and displayed digital koi that flickered every time the Wi-Fi hiccuped, creating the soothing illusion of fish having existential anxiety. He invited guests to admire his aquatic ambiance, though most were too distracted by the eviction notice lying on the coffee table. When the power was eventually cut, the hologram vanished instantly, leaving him staring at empty space like a man who just watched his life savings evaporate in 1080p. He attempted to argue that the aquarium counted as a mental health upgrade, but the landlord remained unmoved, likely because mental health upgrades don't usually require HDMI cables or result in homelessness. 11. Someone skipped rent to purchase a custom perfume that promised olfactory dominance, a phrase that should have raised immediate questions about both safety and sanity. The perfume was blended by a self-proclaimed scent philosopher who mixed rare oils with descriptions like aggressive jasmine and financially fearless cedar. The final bottle cost more than a low-end used car. The wearer believed the fragrance would assert confidence, but reviewers, aka friends forced to inhale it, described the smell as a corporate tax document dipped in flowers. The scent was so overpowering that a neighbor once knocked on the door to ask whether something was on fire. Despite this, the purchaser insisted it was an investment in aura projection. When the eviction notice arrived, they dabbed more perfume on as if it would intimidate the legal system. Unfortunately for them, the only projection that happened was relocating their belongings to the curb while smelling faintly of expensive hubris. 12. A woman spent her entire rent payment on a luxury smart mirror, marketed as an enlightenment device for your bathroom. The mirror delivered daily affirmations, rated her outfits, and occasionally glitched, calling her visitor like it was unsure of her identity. It also came with a costly monthly subscription for premium reflections, a phrase that made the landlord suspiciously raise an eyebrow when she tried to explain her missing rent. The mirror often malfunctioned, once informing her she had the aura of someone who forgot something important, which, ironically, she absolutely had, paying for housing. When the property manager arrived to discuss eviction, the mirror brightly announced, "You're embracing life transitions," as if mocking the entire situation. She attempted to pack it gently, but the device kept cheerfully narrating her journey, offering upbeat commentary on being removed from an apartment. It was the most optimistic object in the room, which only made everything more tragic. 13. A man blew his rent money on a luxury treadmill designed to simulate famous scenic routes around the world, despite having a strict workout routine of thinking about exercising once every other leap year. The treadmill came with a curved display showing sweeping landscapes he would never visit, like the Swiss Alps or the Pacific Coast Highway. He turned it on twice, once to admire the graphics and once to demonstrate it to a friend before immediately tripping, scraping his knee, and deciding fitness was an overrated concept. After that, the treadmill became a very expensive laundry rack. When the landlord arrived with an eviction notice, the treadmill lit up automatically as if trying to motivate its owner back into adulthood, displaying the route Responsibility Ridge. He unplugged it in embarrassment, muttering something about long-term investments in wellness, which would have been more compelling if he hadn't been eating leftover pizza while leaning against a machine worth more than his security deposit. 14. A woman diverted her rent toward a professional-grade fog machine she claimed would elevate her personal aesthetic. The device could fill a room with atmospheric mist in 30 seconds, turning an ordinary apartment into something resembling a questionable nightclub. She triggered it for mundane tasks, making toast, brushing her teeth, opening mail. Guests constantly walked into chairs, walls, or philosophical crises because visibility hovered at approximately 3%. The fog machine required gallons of scented fluid, including options like Mystic Forest, Industrial Sunrise, and Regret Vanilla. The landlord became aware of the situation after neighbors reported weather conditions inside the building. During the eviction walkthrough, the fog machine activated unexpectedly, engulfing everything in dramatic haze while she insisted it was an investment in ambiance. Unfortunately for her, ambiance does not satisfy lease agreements, and the only thing elevated that day was the landlord's blood pressure. 15. Someone spent rent money on a luxury bread maker that claimed it could artisanally express the soul of the wheat. The machine cost nearly a month's salary and came with a spiral-bound philosophy booklet explaining that bread should be an emotional collaboration between grain and human intention. The purchaser became obsessed, waking early to whisper motivational quotes to the dough as if raising a small, gluten-based child prodigy. The resulting loaves were fine, competent even, but certainly not worth sacrificing the roof overhead. When the eviction date arrived, the tenant attempted to justify the purchase by offering the landlord a slice of mindfulness rye, which tasted remarkably like regular rye, but with a faint aftertaste of financial consequences. As movers cleared the apartment, the bread maker beeped mournfully, announcing the completion of a loaf no one would ever eat. It was the perfect metaphor for the entire ordeal: warm, crusty, and baked with choices no financially stable adult should ever make. 16. A man diverted his entire rent toward a temperature-controlled cheese humidor because he'd read an article claiming true connoisseurs age cheese with emotional intention. He filled it with fancy wheels he couldn't pronounce, each cradled like dairy royalty on individual marble slabs. The humidor tracked humidity, gas levels, and even displayed a cheese mood index, which should have been a warning that sanity was no longer steering the ship. He'd give visitors solemn tours, as if showing them a Renaissance art collection, insisting they respect the cheese's personal journey. Meanwhile, the landlord grew tired of receiving nothing but excuses and increasingly enthusiastic emails about rind development. When eviction day arrived, the man frantically tried to negotiate by offering a slice of walnut-infused brie as partial payment, a gesture the landlord declined without hesitation. The humidor, glowing like a gourmet spaceship, remained the only object in the apartment with stable housing. 17. Someone chose to skip rent to acquire a voice-controlled luxury closet that claimed it could optimize personal expression. The device rotated clothes on a motorized track, offered fashion advice in an unnervingly soothing tone, and occasionally scolded its owner for choosing emotionally beige outfits. It also required a pricey monthly subscription to unlock advanced features, such as seasonal color alignment. Instead of using it responsibly, the owner spent entire evenings conversing with the closet like it was a spiritual guide trapped inside a carousel. When the landlord finally arrived to address months of unpaid rent, the closet greeted him with, "Your energy suggests transitional uncertainty," which he interpreted correctly as, "Another gadget has replaced basic financial priorities." The tenant tried to explain the closet was a lifestyle investment, but the landlord remained firm, likely because lifestyle investments generally shouldn't involve rotating wardrobes diagnosing existential crises. As the tenant packed, the closet whispered, "Consider bolder choices," a bit of advice that had clearly come far too late. 18. A woman spent her rent money on a biometric smart pillow that analyzed sleep patterns, whispered affirmations, and claimed to elevate the subconscious toward elite performance. The pillow tracked everything from breathing rhythms to dream ambition levels, a metric that meant absolutely nothing but sounded scientific enough to justify the purchase. Every morning, the pillow generated a report card judging her sleep as if she were failing a silent nocturnal class. She found it motivating. Her landlord did not. When payments stopped coming, the landlord visited and was greeted by the pillow announcing, "Your visitor exudes financial tension," which might be the most accurate statement any piece of betting has ever produced. She insisted the pillow was essential for achieving her highest potential, though sleeping indoors might have been even more helpful. During the eviction, the pillow attempted to calm her with pre-programmed breathing exercises while movers carried it away, unaware they were handling the world's most expensive guilt machine. 19. A guy funneled his rent into a crystal-infused champagne saber engraved with his initials and the phrase, "Destiny favors the dramatic." He had never opened a champagne bottle in his life, but he claimed the saber was a necessary gateway to a future lifestyle. Instead of practicing outside like a rational person, he attempted to saber a bottle in his apartment, resulting in a spray of foam, panic, and a cork ricocheting off the smoke detector with lethal enthusiasm. The saber itself got its own velvet display stand, positioned prominently in the living room like a monument to impulsive decisions. His landlord, already unimpressed with months of unpaid rent, arrived just in time to see him polishing the saber with ceremonial reverence. Attempts to explain its symbolic significance did not move the landlord, who reminded him rent is traditionally paid in dollars, not theatrically dangerous collectibles. The saber gleamed proudly as he packed to leave. Truly, the only thing in the room that had achieved its destiny. 20. Someone spent rent on a luxury wine-tasting robot described as the future of palate enlightenment. It didn't pour wine, it tasted it, analyzed it, and scolded the owner for choosing emotionally inconsistent bottles. The robot had a sleek metallic arm, a tiny palate sensor that looked suspiciously like a USB stick, and a habit of declaring certain wines philosophically disappointing. It cost more than several months' rent, but was treated like a visiting dignitary. Guests were horrified to learn that the human owner wasn't allowed to drink until the robot finished issuing notes on tannins and vibrational fruit alignment. The landlord became involved when complaints arrived about robotic proclamations echoing through the building at midnight, such as, "This Cabernet lacks integrity." When eviction came, the robot tried to defend its owner by scanning the landlord and announcing, "Your aura pairs poorly with conflict." The landlord unplugged it mid-lecture, creating the quietest moment of the entire tenancy. 21. A woman diverted every cent of rent money toward a high-end meditation pod shaped like an egg, promising sensory transcendence, which is an elegant phrase for paying 4 figures to sit in a Bluetooth womb. The pod played binaural soundscapes, glowed softly like it was preparing for alien departure, and occasionally emitted gentle mist described as consciousness support vapor. She spent hours inside it, pretending enlightenment could override budgeting. Her landlord, however, did not achieve transcendence when rent disappeared. When he visited, the pod automatically opened like a spaceship door, and she emerged dramatically, insisting she had accessed a higher perspective on financial stress. The landlord did not share this perspective. As movers arrived to reclaim the apartment, the pod whispered pre-recorded affirmations such as "growth begins with release," which felt a little too poetic given the circumstances. The mist system activated one final time, turning the scene into a humid metaphor for misguided priorities. 22. A man skipped rent to purchase a custom, handcrafted leather jacket embedded with micro-LED constellations, meant to simulate the night sky for urban dreamers. The jacket sparkled every time he moved, making him look like a meteorite trying to order coffee. It required a portable battery pack the size of a paperback and emitted a faint buzzing sound that suggested the stars were struggling. Despite the impracticality, he wore it everywhere, confidently explaining that true style investments transcend practicality. His landlord disagreed, particularly when he showed up to discuss unpaid rent and was greeted by a tenant glowing like a low-budget superhero. Attempts to negotiate were complicated by the jacket dramatically twinkling whenever the wearer made a bold statement. When eviction day arrived, he zipped it up one last time, illuminating the hallway like a celestial exit sign. The jacket may not have saved his housing situation, but it did ensure everyone remembered the moment he left orbit. 23. Someone spent their rent money on a luxury scent-diffusing sculpture, shaped like a mythological creature that expelled designer fragrances through its nostrils. It required special cartridges, costing nearly as much as groceries, and emitted scents with pretentious names like Cedar of Triumph and Whisper of Wealth, which is bold branding for something living in an apartment behind on payments. The sculpture stood on a pedestal, glowing ominously while releasing scented fog that made the entire place smell like a billionaire's waiting room. Neighbors complained the aroma drifted into the hallway, confusing delivery drivers into thinking they'd wandered into a perfume commercial. When the landlord visited to address the missing rent, the sculpture released a burst of fragrance as if trying to distract him with luxury. It failed. The tenant attempted to argue that the device enhanced the property's value, but the landlord remained unconvinced, probably because wealth whispers don't pay mortgages. 24. A woman poured her rent into a self-driving luggage robot designed to elevate the travel experience, even though she had no immediate travel plans and rarely left town. The suitcase followed her everywhere, humming politely like a loyal metallic pet. She used it to carry groceries, emotional baggage, and once, inexplicably, a single apple. The suitcase spoke in a soft voice that often reminded her to embrace the journey, which was ironic given the only journey happening was toward eviction. The landlord encountered the suitcase before encountering her. It politely introduced itself, scanned his shoes, and announced, "Visitor identified, tense energy." When the eviction date arrived, the suitcase attempted to comfort its owner with travel tips, while rolling next to her like a confused, futuristic companion. It may have elevated her travel experience, but it certainly didn't elevate her ability to pay for somewhere to store it. 25. A man used rent money to buy a designer drone meant exclusively for delivering celebratory confetti in moments of personal triumph. The drone came with pre-programmed routines such as promotion burst, romantic sparkle, and you tried, each releasing themed clouds of biodegradable glitter. He launched it constantly, completing a load of laundry, finding his keys, reheating leftovers. Nothing escaped ceremonial acknowledgement. Neighbors grew tired of confetti storms hitting their balconies like festive pollen. The landlord arrived after receiving complaints and immediately got confetti bombed by the drone's welcome flourish, which did not improve his mood. The tenant attempted to claim the drone increased community morale, an argument that collapsed instantly under the weight of several months' missing payments. As he packed his belongings, the drone hovered mournfully, releasing a slow cascade of glitter titled "Dignified Exit," a label that generously overstated the situation. 26. Someone spent months of rent on a luxury climate-controlled pet stroller designed for elite companion comfort, even though their dog refused to sit in it and preferred walking like a normal organism. The stroller featured built-in speakers that played classical music, adjustable ambient lighting, and a small misting system meant to evoke a sense of pastoral serenity. The dog responded by barking at it, suspicious it might be some kind of rival. Despite this, the owner proudly wheeled the empty stroller around town, insisting the dog would learn to appreciate refinement. Meanwhile, the landlord, who had yet to see a single rent payment, did not appreciate the refinement of unpaid bills. When eviction day arrived, the stroller was packed first, tucked carefully into a car like a fragile heirloom, while the dog sat in the passenger seat wearing the expression of an animal who absolutely knew this was all avoidable. 27. A man sacrificed rent for an automated indoor waterfall engineered to invite tranquility into modern spaces. It was essentially a glorified fountain, but with enough chrome plating and LED accents to resemble a spa designed by a spaceship. The waterfall required constant filter replacements and produced a soft, babbling sound that made visitors feel like they were trapped in a meditation app. Unfortunately, the waterfall also leaked, a detail that became impossible to ignore when the neighbor downstairs reported indoor precipitation. The landlord confronted the tenant, who insisted the waterfall was a crucial mental health tool, though one might argue staying housed offers comparable benefits. When he was finally evicted, the movers struggled to transport the surprisingly heavy structure, which sloshed indignantly as if offended by the intrusion. Tranquility did not accompany him out of the building, though the lingering humidity certainly did. 28. A woman blew her rent on a luxury virtual stylist robot that projected outfits into the air and delivered brutally honest feedback about her fashion choices. The robot's programming must have been written by an emotionally unfiltered teenager, because it regularly said things like, "This outfit communicates disappointment," or "Are we dressing for ambition or surrender today?" She treated its critiques like gospel, even though it once recommended pairing sequins with hiking boots to challenge societal expectations. Meanwhile, the landlord struggled to understand how someone could afford a robot that sounded like a judgmental roommate but couldn't pay for housing. When eviction day arrived, the robot projected a farewell outfit titled Resilient Wanderer, which looked suspiciously like an attempt to rebrand homelessness as a bohemian lifestyle. The tenant accepted this with solemn gratitude, proving the robot had successfully completed its mission: prioritize aesthetics over survival. 29. Someone decided rent was less urgent than buying a gold-trimmed smart toaster capable of burning inspirational quotes onto bread. Each morning, the toaster branded phrases like "seize the day" or "invest in yourself" onto slices that cost a fraction of the monthly rent he was ignoring. The toaster also connected to an app allowing him to upload custom messages, which he used to create motivational carb-based announcements such as "Greatness begins now," despite greatness refusing to begin with basic financial decisions. The landlord eventually arrived, baffled to find a tenant who could produce affirmational breakfast items but not rent. In a last-ditch effort to negotiate, the tenant offered the landlord a slice imprinted with "Let's Talk Solutions," a gesture that did nothing to resolve the situation. As he packed his belongings, the toaster cheerfully toasted "New Beginnings," demonstrating an optimism unmatched by any other object in the room. And that's the grand tour of luxury nonsense, proof that wallets flee faster than common sense. Drop the dumbest one below, and if you survive this chaos, you know what to do.